how amazing it is, or not so coincidental, when the data in fact supports that philosophy of abundance. Through tonight's presentation, hopefully we'll be able to provide the facts that you will want to know in order to form your opinion on some issues. And in this way, you can enter the debate as an informed participant. I also want to mention Medaille's role in our community as it relates to this topic. At Medaille College, we have 4 core values: curiosity, integrity, excellence, and community. And as such, our mission statement clearly says that we are here to educate and develop empowered individuals for academic achievement, career success, and civic engagement, thereby contributing to a healthy, diverse democracy. And we very intentionally chose that word individuals and not students, because the faculty, staff, students, alumni, we have several members of our Board of Trustees here tonight, and you all, by being here, you are helping us to fulfill our commitment to educating and developing empowered individuals, those of you who are here tonight. So I'm proud that our Medaille community is committed to the free exchange of ideas to help open and expand the conversation and discussion. And we welcome ideas from a variety of backgrounds and encourage the flow and exchange of a conversation that represents various viewpoints. We believe it is our job as a part of the educational process to expose our students to those extraordinary individuals of diverse nationalities, faiths, and backgrounds. Moreover, it is our privilege to help educate those same individuals so they too can achieve success in their career and engage in civic responsibilities in our community. And now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Eva Hassett. In some ways, Eva has been put in the hot seat when it comes to issues surrounding immigrants and refugees, a role which I think she agrees she might not have signed up for in exactly this capacity. However, the role she did take on as Executive Director of the International Institute is an important one, especially in the world and especially in Buffalo. Under her leadership, the Institute works to help assimilate immigrants and refugees into our wonderful region. They help become, and they help to be, that's all folks, they help them to become contributing members in a variety of ways. They teach them our language, and we learn about them. We find them housing, and they help to build ours. We train them for their jobs, and they help to create new ones, just to name a few. Eva joined IIB with over 25 years of management experience that included serving as Executive Vice President at Savarino Construction. She also held several top-level positions in the Massiello administration. Eva, we certainly want to hear and learn more about Buffalo's immigrant and refugee population, so please join me on stage. And you do have some index cards, so if you have questions that you would like addressed, as time permits, folks will be coming around to gather those, and then we'll do our best to get to all of them. Eva, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Right. Thank you. Good evening. I am honored and humbled to be here tonight. I want to thank President Maker and Vice President John Crawford and Trustee Horace Jordan, with whom I had breakfast that I think started this whole thing. And Christy Frontera, who managed me and made all the copies of the handouts that the ambassadors so kindly gave you as you walked in. I hope you will find them interesting. Before I start, I think I want to talk a little bit about why I want to talk about the economic impact of immigrants and refugees on Western New York. I am a lifelong lover of Buffalo. I fear that it may be genetic. My career professionally has always focused on improving the lives of people who live in Buffalo. And that really didn't change when I went to work at the International Institute and started helping immigrants and refugees. I am increasingly convinced that immigrants and refugees are the most important thing that's happening in Western New York right now. And actually for a long time, that was the title of my PowerPoint. I often speak, and you often will hear people speak about the more emotional reasons why immigrants and refugees are important. That they add to our humanity, that they bring diversity and richness and new cultures, that they help me see my rights as an American better, that I can vote, that I can dissent, that I can practice a religion or no religion at all. They make me more conscious that I have advantages that others don't, and that I need to use those advantages to benefit others. So we often speak about those, I often do. But about 4 years ago, I started to see evidence of another way in which immigrants and refugees are really important to Western New York. And that's the economic way. And the more I kept looking at this, the more critical I felt it was, and the more that I saw the information, the data and research supporting that conclusion. So I think that no matter what your political persuasion on the humanitarian side, you might find this particular argument important, particularly if you care about the economy in Western New York, which frankly I think everybody should. It affects us all. So I hope that you will find this relatively compelling, and if you do, that we can talk about what that means and what that means for all of us in Western New York. I would be happy to take questions about the presentation or about anything else that you want to talk about after. So, thanks to Ian. There's Ian. Thanks to Ian for setting me up with technology tonight. I'll say one more thing. If you can't hear me, holler at me, and I'll get closer to the mic or talk louder. Okay? So, I want to talk about when I'm talking about immigrants, I include refugees in that concept, in that idea. How do immigrants affect population growth, workforce, including the professional workforce, new business growth, wages and wealth creation, and innovation? So I'm going to start with population. This is the United States, not Buffalo yet. We'll get to Buffalo. 13% of the population in the United States is foreign born right now. This is something that's really familiar for people who live in Buffalo. There are a lot of cities in this country that lost population between 1960 and 1980. Here are a lot of them. Here are a number of them. Buffalo, you can see, lost 33% of its population from 1960 to 1980. Of these cities, 29 of the 50 largest cities saw population decline. Of these 29 cities, 14 bounced back in population between 1980 and 2013. Here they are. But what's really significant is that they bounced back because of growth in their immigrant population. And even New York City wouldn't have grown without an increase in the immigrant population in New York City. This is pretty important. Here are the cities that rebounded without an increase in their immigrant population. No city that lost population in that 1960-1980 period rebounded without an increase in the immigrant population. There's some census statistics that just came out yesterday, they're not in your piles of copies, that looked at metropolitan statistical areas and population growth. So the census is every 10 years, but in between there are figures that come out. And one of the things that I think was in the headlines was that Chicago lost population. The Chicago metropolitan area lost 22,000 people. And everybody went, oh my gosh. Two other things that were true. Almost every one of the major metropolitan areas slowed down in its rate of growth. So even New York, which had been growing pretty fast, slowed down in its rate of growth. But all of the metropolitan areas, with the exception of Chicago, were still growing. The reason they were still growing is the increase in their immigrant population. Without immigrant population growth, all of those cities would look more like Buffalo has looked for the last 50 years. So even just because of population, we can think a little bit more about how population affects economy. If you're not thinking about the immigrant population and trying to figure out how to attract and support the immigrant population to your city, you're missing the major force in population growth. let's talk about the labor force. This is from the Brookings Institute for you academics, and it's looking at around the country the kind of mix of immigrant population in different cities. Buffalo is called a high-skilled city. What that really means is we've been an immigrant gateway here for a long time. So we have a very diverse mix of foreign-born in Buffalo. They're from a lot of different places. And again, we'll get to some Buffalo data later. That's a good thing economically, because that means it's a mix of experience and a mix of skills and a mix of education. And so that's an advantage. And you see most of the Northeast, again, the old immigrant gateway cities are those blue triangles. How do immigrants affect the workforce? Again, we know in Buffalo that the native-born population is smaller and older. The immigrant population, which is growing faster than the native-born population, is more likely to be of working age. This is national data, but it's even more true in a city like Buffalo, which has been losing population and getting older for a long time. So immigrants have a big effect on the growth of population and an even larger effect on the workforce. And again, if we're thinking about the economy, we have to think about the workforce. So these are a few examples of issues that relate to professionals. And I want to think a little bit about how immigrants might affect these. So this was in the news, I don't know, 2 weeks ago maybe. The SUNY chancellor came out and said that she sees a teacher shortage coming, and that this is a big issue for Buffalo, for the SUNY system, and that Buffalo State College, which graduates a lot of teachers, will never be able to graduate teachers fast enough to address this teacher shortage. So think about that for a second. This is a bad slide that should slide a little more this way, of a convening about 9 months ago that was at the White House about skilled immigrants, and tried to pull together people from all over the country to talk about these issues that are coming to the fore around skilled immigrants, meaning doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers. So hold that in your mind for a minute. This is another crooked slide, bad slide, that has to do with the state of Minnesota. So in Minnesota, they realized at a point about 4 years ago that they had a shortage of healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses. The state really realized this and decided they had to do something about it. So what they realized was they had a shortage of healthcare professionals, and they had a lot of foreign educated health professionals, doctors, nurses, who were not working in the health profession because those doctors and nurses needed to be relicensed, and in some cases needed to have their educational credentials reviewed and maybe needed to take some more courses before they could be relicensed. What Minnesota realized was that the state could work to make that process easier, and if they did that, move faster, I guess is what I want to say, and reach out more to those immigrant professionals. And if they did that, they would be able to address the physician shortage and the nurse shortage by getting foreign educated nurses and doctors to work in Minnesota healthcare. And so in Minnesota, they revamped their state process, and they are addressing their shortage that way. This is a slide from Washington State, which did the same thing for healthcare professionals and teachers. They realized they had a teacher shortage, and they started looking for those foreign educated teachers and figuring out how to relicense them faster so that they had a diverse teacher body when they had a diverse student body, which really makes a lot of sense. I just saw something in the media within the last week. The state of Maine is doing this now for EMTs. They realized in Maine they have a shortage of emergency medical technicians, and they're working to make sure that there are people who have training and foreign educated training, that they're relicensing them as EMTs, and they're addressing their shortage that way. This report came out in December, and again, sorry for the slide. This is from something called the Migration Policy Institute, which is a pretty well-respected national research institute. For the first time ever, this institute quantified the lost wages from the kinds of things I'm talking about. So very often people talk about being in a situation where there's a foreign educated doctor who's driving a taxi cab, or there's a foreign educated engineer who's washing dishes in a restaurant because that's the job they could get when they came here to the United States. For the first time, the Migration Policy Institute tried to put a number on the lost wages from that doctor earning as a dishwasher versus earning as a doctor. So they tried to quantify nationally what the lost wages were from that kind of situation. And here are some of the figures that they came up with. Nationally, $39 billion in lost wages from the under and unemployment of foreign educated, college educated immigrants in the U.S. In New York State, which is one of several states they looked at, lost wages of $5 billion from the 200,000 college educated immigrants who are working under their skill level. $5 billion is a lot of earnings. It's a lot of economic impact. If you're running a state government or a local government, that's a lot of income tax revenue. And it's a lot of service as doctors or engineers or nurses that isn't being given to all of us in our community at this moment in time. To me, this is a really sobering figure. And the fix for this is at the state level. So just like Minnesota and Washington and Maine, the fix for this is for New York State to say, holy cow, we want to figure out how to get at those 200,000 people and make it easier for them to work in their field, to relicense in their field. It's really a question of having a strategy and deciding that that's a priority. And for me, when there's $5 billion attached to it, it should be a priority. So I think that that's a really important report. Okay. Population, labor force, now we're going to talk about, so immigrants are 13% of the population, 16% of the labor force, 18% of business owners. They're disproportionately represented as business owners. These are some figures you may know. Some of you have seen them before. Fortune 500, more than 40% of the companies were founded by immigrants or their children. Anybody know who founded Google? Sergey Brin, who was a refugee from Russia, founded Google. I'm going to show you some more brands that you know that were immigrant founded. But immigrants start businesses that are little teeny, like at the West Side Bazaar. Where's Michelle? There's Michelle. But also giant, right? So immigrants are very entrepreneurial, and that affects our economy. This is at the neighborhood business level. So those of you who are familiar with Grant Street or Brutal Avenue or some of our neighborhood commercial streets, this is a study that showed that immigrants are driving all the net growth in Main Street businesses. So what are Main Street businesses? So there's 13% of the population, 28% of the Main Street business owners, and more than that, they are, well, I'll show you another graph in a sec, driving the net growth. So these are Main Street businesses, retail shops, restaurants, the things that make our neighborhoods nice to live in, the things that make our neighborhoods convenient, the things that make our neighborhoods work, and oftentimes the things that lead the revitalization of our neighborhoods are immigrant-owned businesses like this. Oops. Here's the data. 31 of the 50 largest metro areas, all the net growth, and here's Buffalo, and it's true for Buffalo, all the net growth. Not all the growth, all the net growth. So of course native-born people are starting businesses, but immigrants are starting businesses at a faster rate. So the net growth is coming from immigrants. So that says, if you're working in the neighborhood development field, or community development, or small business development, or you're trying to think about revitalizing your city or your neighborhood or your wherever, your locality, and you're not thinking about how to help immigrants be more successful at starting businesses, you're missing all the net growth. So we need a strategy around that. And again, here are some of the figures. And again, this, for me, I understand this colloquially because I go and walk around Grant Street. But when you see the data and the data combines with colloquial, it becomes very powerful. These are some of the brands you know that were founded by immigrants. Don't quiz me completely. I did check every single one of these when I first saw this slide. But it's true. That's pretty powerful, right? High tech. And again, we kind of know this, but when you look at the data, 52% of all the high-tech firms in Silicon Valley over those 10 years. Pretty powerful, not just for wealth creation, but for innovation. For innovation, right? And we often hear it said that the United States may not be able to compete always on labor costs, but we should be able to compete on brain power, on innovation, on product development. Immigrants are really critical to product development. International students, something that the President and I have talked about before. So a large proportion of the STEM students at the undergraduate and graduate level are foreign born. One of the not so great things that's happening lately, I just saw a report in the press, 40% of the colleges and universities in this country are reporting a big drop in international student applications because international students are not so sure that they want to come to the United States. They are now more likely to be applying to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. And that is not a good thing for those institutions who depend on that tuition revenue and depend on the diversity of the student body to make a good learning environment. And it's also not a good thing for the innovation that comes and can stay in the U.S. as a result of those international students. In the state of Michigan, they have a really interesting program. It's an international student retention program. So the state of Michigan actually has a Republican governor, a Tea Party governor, but he very early on saw the value of international students to the Michigan economy, and he made a program that matches employers with international students and really works to use every single legal possible tool within our immigration law to see if we can't get those students and those companies to get really interested in each other so that they increase the possibility of the student staying in Michigan and helping those companies grow in Michigan. So there's some really interesting work going on. But international students are also a big piece of the economy of this country. So now let's talk a little bit about Buffalo. And you all have a copy of this report in your handouts, so you can look at it at your leisure. This was released in late February. It was done by something called the New American Economy, which is a research organization. Buffalo and Syracuse, actually the International Institute of Buffalo, and the Central State CEO, which is the Chamber of Commerce in Syracuse, applied together for a grant that resulted in this data. They did the research, not us. We just got the data. So again, you can look at it at your leisure, but here are some of the highlights. Like I said about the nation, while the U.S. foreign population in Buffalo Metro continues to decline, the foreign-born population is increasing much more rapidly. So Buffalo's rate of decline has kind of slowed down. I'm going to show you a slide in a minute about Erie County's population, which actually grew in 2014 because of immigrants. And we hope that both trends stop, right? We hope we don't lose any more native-born population, and we hope the foreign-born population continues to grow. Mayor Brown thinks soon we will see growth in the Buffalo metro population. And we hope those trends continue. Contributed $3.1 billion to the metro area GDP. Pay taxes, contribute to Social Security and to Medicare. These are some of the statistics from the same report about entrepreneurs in Buffalo and how much they're generating in business income, about the foreign-born population and housing. I was talking to someone about housing before. Foreign-born buy houses, the foreign-born are tenants. And also in job creation. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. This report, which I think you also have in your handout, is for those people who are into economic development. This is the national organization, actually International Economic Development Council. So if you're in the economic development business, this is the conference you go to every year. These are the professionals who think about economic development strategies all over the world. So this is a report that they did in 2013 looking at immigrants and whether they have economic impact. And here's a couple of the conclusions from the report. And this to me goes to that thing about, do immigrants take other people's jobs or do immigrants help create jobs? This study finds that immigration caused an increase in wages for everybody and an increase in employment for everybody. Especially true for the STEM fields, those international students that comprise a lot of the STEM fields. If immigrants are working in the STEM field, they're creating more jobs besides their own for everybody else. So this is very significant in terms of that debate that I think we're having. My real goal is to provide some information to inform that debate. The truth of the matter is, it isn't zero sum. If someone gets a job, it doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. What we're learning is that if an employer can find employees, that employer is going to stay and expand, and that's going to help everybody. Wages are going to go up, jobs are going to be created. I've heard story after story after story in Buffalo of employers who were shrinking their workforce, who were probably going to leave, couldn't figure it out, figured it out, hired immigrants, expanded. And that means expanding for everybody, right? That means staying here as opposed to leaving. So what does the IEDC say you should do? One of the things I think is really important is this one. And that's not an economic development environment, that's an environment, that's a community. Create a community where immigrants feel welcome, where immigrants feel like they matter, like they're valued, where they want to stay, and they want to keep their successful activity here. Population growth. And then this last one is really interesting. So I always talk about Burma. We have a lot of refugees who came to Buffalo from Burma. 10,000, 11,000, 12,000. Burma, as a country, has been closed off from the rest of the world for most of my lifetime, and I'm pretty old. Wasn't trading, wasn't seeing investment, was ruled by a military government that really didn't want to connect to the rest of the world. That's why they made refugees, right? People left because they were persecuted. They couldn't be free there. As the Burmese government is continuing to be more of a democracy, Burma is opening to trade. Burma has incredible natural resources, a huge tourism economy. American companies might be very well interested in exporting or making deals with people in Burma. Well, how would you figure out how to get to somebody in Burma? There are 12,000 people from Burma who live here. And most of them were active in some way in trying to get a democracy in Burma. Many of them were activists. Many of them were super connected people. So if you're really interested in export or international trade, I mean, this is really to the corporate audience, we have people who can help right here. This is to talk about our competition. So I'm actually part of this network that I'm going to show you, but I want to let you know that over the last 4 or 5 years, many, many cities have seen this data and said, holy cow, we have to make a strategy. So this is a movement that at the moment is very positive and supportive of all of the players. This is who was thinking about this stuff in 2009. This is who was thinking, who added in 2015. You see us in Buffalo. This is who's thinking about it now. So this is called the Welcoming Economies Global Network. It's all of those cities, all Great Lakes cities, all cities with economies like Buffalo, who realized that, and really made a commitment, that immigrants were really critical to their economic development strategy. And that being welcoming was the first thing you needed to do to get the economic benefits. And that in the long run, that attracting and retaining immigrants was going to be very important to not just the social fabric, but the economic fabric. This network actually produced a little toolkit that has 15 programs that anybody can copy and bring, including like international student retention programs that you can bring to your locality. So it's a very helpful network right now. All the cities in Ohio, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Detroit, any number of cities are working together trying to lift all boats at this moment in time. So let's talk about Buffalo. Here's our population. You can see we're still going down a little bit in 2013, but we're starting to increase this portion of the bar, which again we hope will lead to an increase in the whole bar. We have a diverse foreign-born community, strong immigration history. I wouldn't be standing here if we didn't have a strong immigration history. We have great immigration infrastructure organizations that help immigrants. The International Institute of Buffalo is 99 years old. We've always helped immigrants for 99 years. I think we are a welcoming community. New York State is investing. We have a welcoming mayor. We have a welcoming county executive. We have a welcoming governor. So I think we have a great setup for trying to be more strategic about getting these economic benefits. Here's the makeup of the foreign-born residents in Buffalo. The main thing to take from here is it's diverse. It's not all from one place. Here's 2013. Who's here? 68,000 foreign-born residents in the Buffalo metro. That surprise anybody? It did me. It's a big number, 68,000. Biggest group is Canada. Some of these are refugee groups, some of them are not. Clearly there are refugees and immigrants from a lot of these countries. But that's a lot of people, 68,000 people. This was to me. Where are they working in Buffalo? Where are they overrepresented? According to their share of the population, fabricators, machine operators, mechanics, sales clerks and cashiers, teachers, professors, social scientists, doctors, lawyers, and engineers. So they're already working in fields that are important to us, where we might have a shortage at the moment. Again, very significant. Erie County's population grew in 2014 by about 12,000, and it was attributed to immigrants. That's the first time the county's population has grown in a long time. And again, we haven't really gotten strategic about trying to recruit or attract immigrants and refugees here.